We can rebirth ourselves in the middle of our lives. And I know it can feel scary to be in this in-between place because we know we're not who we once were, but we don't quite know who we're becoming. Intuition isn't this vague thing. We have to, it's human. We have to follow it up with the grounded, practical baby steps. The number one relationship when you're working on your relationship with your intuition is your relationship with your inner self. If you want to increase your intuition, I really recommend.
This week, we're uncovering practices to support you in trusting your intuition, how to make more aligned decisions, and really integrating your masculine and feminine energy. So join us for this really powerful conversation talking about light and dark so that you can really integrate and discover the gifts within hitting rock bottom. Today's guest, Rebecca Campbell, is a bestselling author. She's a podcast host and spiritual teacher. Her work has been featured in Vogue, Oprah.com, and Psychologies Magazine. We're coming together to swap stories so you can hear our best advice around how you can avoid burnout. This is a beautiful podcast. I hope you enjoy. I'm so happy that you're here, Rebecca. Thank you for your time and just sharing your beautiful presence. I wanted just to dive right in and talk about intuition, because I know this is a big part of your work. And so much of us have been conditioned to look outside of ourselves for answers. And I think any really good teacher is going to point us back to ourselves. And so how do you support people in either and or first developing their intuition or trusting their intuition?
Well, I think the first thing to say is that I think a lot of people think intuition is like this special ability that's like really spiritual, but it's actually our body that's intuitive and through our body's senses. And so I think that for me at least, and I've seen it for many of my students as well, that's like the biggest like, what? Oh my gosh, yeah. And you learn when you're doing psychic development training about the clairs. So we would have heard about clairvoyant, which is clear seeing, clairaudient, clear hearing, clairsentient, clear feeling, claircognizant, clear knowing, and so on. And yeah, the thing about that is without our body, we wouldn't be intuitive at all. And so I think that's the first thing to realize. And that the more in our body and in tune with our body we can be, the clearer our intuition is. So I think that's the first thing that's quite surprising for people.
Yeah, that's grounded. And then everybody's intuitive because we all have a body.
Everyone is. Yeah. Then we realize, but we, in many cases, most of us have grown up in a society or a system where we've been taught not to trust it. So to look outside of ourselves rather than within ourselves. And when I say within ourselves, I also mean like our inner senses. All of the senses that we have, we're sensual beings, are also inner senses. And so while I know, we've gone to mediums or clairvoyants where we see them as like overly psychic and as if they have these great big visions that are outside of themselves. And sometimes people do see and hear things that seem to be in the physical, but in most cases, it's an inner subtle sense. And my first teacher of intuition is a woman called Sonia Choquette, and she taught me to think about intuition as like tuning into a radio station. So we've all, maybe people don't tune into radio stations like we did when we were younger, but I definitely did. So maybe younger generations don't know what I'm talking about. But to tune into that radio station, it's this subtle little like trigger that we're like, is it there? Is it there? And then you have it. And so the first thing I recommend for all of us, first of all, we are all intuitive. There's no one on the planet that is not intuitive. It's an innate natural sense, and we have various psychic senses within that. But the second one is I like to see intuition as well as like an inner relationship, and to liken it kind of like any friendship or person in your life, the more time you spend with them, the more easily it is to recognize their voice when they're speaking, even like seeing them in a crowd, you can sense them. But even more than that, you know, we have some people in our lives where you can sense when they're entering the room. And we're not even using our outer senses for that. So intuition I see as being like that. Now, I think the number one relationship when you're working on your relationship with your intuition is your relationship with your inner self. I call it your soul, but there are so many different titles that we can give it.
Yeah.
And so that's why I believe that if you want to increase your intuition, I really recommend prioritizing that relationship. Now, I know when I first started studying intuition, I wasn't married, I didn't have kids, and so I had a lot more time to devote to hanging out with my soul, and now less so. But even when we're really busy, I really love this challenge to find a way to weave that connection with our inner self into our everyday life.
Yeah. And one thing that I found really helpful is to do an intuition journal, where it's like a dream journal where you're just writing down, what was your sense about something? Did it happen or not? Sometimes we don't always have that information, but it just builds that trust and like, oh, how does my intuition speak to me? So that we can just kind of develop that muscle.
Yeah, it's like building your confidence through that evidence.
That's right.
So for you, do you have like a particular sense that you like? Do you hear? Do you feel?
No,
do you
I
know?
do. Okay, so I hear sometimes, but I can only receive. If I try to ask, the ego and the mind really messes with it. And I don't mind if I have just one way of knowing. So my main way is my gut knowing. And I usually know right away. So, but trusting is a different thing. I think part of my,
oh my gosh,
part of my
totally.
exploration is like, oh, bless my parenting that my parents did with me was a lot more authoritarian. So it was like, do what I say instead of really trusting myself. And I can see that we're doing it with our kids differently. And, my parents had that done to them. So I think parenting, as any conscious parent, also, it's really important to really check in with your kids around what their wisdom is. I remember my dad would say, I would tell him how to drive to go home. I'd be like, turn right, turn left. And he would turn the wrong way. And it helped me learn, right? So it helped me build that trust. And so just those simple things, I think the way that we're raised can support us and keeping that channel open and trusting it.
Yeah, so true.
But I know a lot of people have this curiosity of like, what's fear and what's intuition? How do you help people differentiate?
Well, I think the first way is through like that radio station I was telling you about, recognizing and stating it when it is the voice of your mind or your fear, which, let's be honest, they're not bad things. They're just different things, you know, that all information that we can integrate and is very, very helpful. Obviously, those things that we're fearful of, sometimes they're an indication of our greatest gifts and if we're courageous, and even expanded version of our path. But I do find that the voice of our mind, like our linear logical mind versus our creative intuitive mind, the intuitive mind, which I would call the voice of the soul, it tends to have less of an ulterior motive.
Yeah.
So it's not trying to like make something happen. It doesn't have that push to it or urgency or the other way is I find saying it out loud is a good indication because even if you're in conversation with someone, so you're trying to nut something out and you're like, yeah, da, 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 and I know when I'm in my mind, my voice kind of goes up like this and da, 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 like that. And my throat is probably a little bit tighter, for example. I'm probably talking more up here. Whereas when I'm talking from my soul, the cadence is slower. My voice drops considerably. And it's much more subtle, but it's calm.
Yeah.
Even if what it's saying is big.
Yeah.
And I think we've all experienced this when we're talking to someone, because really we're talking about authenticity here, because I think intuition is harmony, really. So you know what it's like when someone says something or you're watching something on TV, you can feel it in your body if it feels true and authentic versus something that like feels like that record scratch, you know?
Yeah.
And
totally.
there's nothing wrong with it all, because sometimes we need to voice it out loud to be like, oh my God, I don't even know. That's not it. I thought that was, no, that's not true. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I hear like giving permission to find your way and really tuning to your body. And I really find that often the voice of intuition for me is not long-winded. It's very short often, and it doesn't need explanation or justification. If I'm like, really, it doesn't actually answer.
Yes.
It's just like, I gave you the information.
And I think this is the bit that can like stop us from properly living an intuitive life, because the mind will come with a step-by-step instruction manual. It will make logical sense. And so it's much easier to follow the logic than the soul path. And so that's why in all of my workshops, what I'm always doing is saying, okay, what's your soul calling you to do? Or, you know, a different type of inquiry, but let's voice that. And so often it's like, oh my God, either that's really abstract, I don't really know what that means, or who am I to do that? Or, oh my gosh, I'm afraid, or there's no way I can make that happen, you know? Yeah. And so then you go, okay, what's the next baby step? Okay. And so often that baby step might seem to be completely nothing to do with it. Like, for example, when I wonder if you have had this moment where you receive like a big call. Like for me, it was to write books. I knew I'd been doing affirmations for years, saying my creations inspire people all over the world, but I didn't know how to make it happen. And then I got very clear, write a book about X. And what I was being called to do was write a book encouraging people to step out of the spiritual closet and trust the big call of their soul. And then I'm like, I don't know how to do that, you know? And so it was like, oh my God, how can I possibly do it? But it was a clear call, like really clear. And so I asked myself, what lights me up? That was my baby step. Ask yourself what lights you up, figure that out. And I discovered that flowers lit me up, which again just seemed really superficial actually, and just kind of like a bit like, how's that going to help me? Like, come on, give me more of a plan. Practical. Yeah, come on. I'm a Virgo, Scorpio rising, Aries moon. It's a complicated mix. But yeah, so anyway, but I knew to trust intuition when you hear it. And so I started buying myself flowers every week. That's when I started and really started deepening a relationship with beauty and the rose. And then I live in the UK. I was living in London at the time, and I discovered Regent's Park Rose Garden with this gorgeous, like I think it's like 40,000 David Austin fragrant roses there. And so I would walk there. I was working as a creative director at the time in advertising, and I'd walk through the garden every day and I'd meditate. And I noticed how inspired I was by the beauty and the flowers. And so my baby step at that time was to write for 10 minutes every day, just on my way to work. And that's what I did. And day after day after day, it turned into, you know, social media posts, and then a website, and then a blog, a book proposal, and then a book. Got a publishing deal. And by that stage, when I was actually had the publishing deal, I left that career. And I remember when I literally clicked file save and closed my computer, it was like the book is done. I looked up and I found myself sitting in the middle of Regent's Park Rose Garden, where I'd written the whole thing from park bench to park bench to park bench. And so that little baby step that seemed like eye roll, like how's that going to help? It does. It really does. And so I feel really passionate about this, that intuition isn't this vague thing. We have to, it's human. We have to follow it up with the grounded, practical baby steps. Yeah.
Yeah. I love that story, because I think a lot of people would just dismiss that, or, you know, just think of their rational mind, but you followed the simple directions and the next thing was revealed, and the next thing, and it just also fed you in a deep way that your logical mind couldn't have figured out.
Right. And that's the thing that I think is tricky with intuition, because it does require faith and discipline, which are seemingly two opposite things.
Imagine having a fulfilling career doing what you love, working from anywhere in the world, setting your own hours while making good money and a big impact. If that lights you up, then I'm super excited to share with you today's sponsor, the Institute for Coaching Mastery. This is my robust, accredited year-long certification program for new or seasoned coaches, therapists, leaders, and those just looking to up-level their life in a profound way. We have an amazing community of students from all around the world who have really started their journey to expand with us both personally and professionally. And this experience is designed to give you the 3 things that you need to thrive. So first, you have all of the tools and support you need to move past what's been holding you back so that you can completely change the trajectory of your life. And then you learn how to masterfully and confidently facilitate transformation with your clients or your team, regardless of your niche. If you want to do health, business, relationship, or you just have no idea yet, we hold your hand through that. And then lastly, you'll receive my 6-figure and beyond signature roadmap that's customizable to meet you wherever you are. So whether you want to do high ticket sales, online marketing, or you just want to hit 6 figures without ever needing to go on social media, we've got you covered. And this truly is the most rewarding work in the world. We have new students now who have a wait list of dream clients in under a year. We also have seasoned students who are doing $80,000 months. And this is really about creating lasting transformation from the inside out so that you can share your gifts and serve the world in all the ways that you're called to. And I've seen firsthand the power of what happens when you have the community to collaborate with, but you also have the right tools and resources to really thrive. And so whether you want to do your own personal development, you're wanting to become a coach, or you're just looking for a cutting edge approach to really grow your business, the Institute for Coaching Mastery is for you. You are held every single step of the way. And so if you want to get behind the scenes access to the Institute with 3 proven transformational tools for free to help you create the business and life you love, all you have to do is go to alyssanobriga.com/tools, or you can find us at alyssanobriga.com/apply now to see all the details and apply today. You know, and I know a lot of people they struggle with decision making. And so, and our intuition and being tuned in can also support, but sometimes they're thinking I can make the wrong decision, or they focus on worst case scenario. And I was just in a park this weekend, really inquiring around decision making. And I realized we make thousands of decisions every day, what to eat, what to wear, where our hand is in this moment. There's just life happening. And so it just happened.
Now I'm like, where is my hand?
Yeah, exactly. Did I put it there? Did it just happen? Exactly. Right. And so it shows us that actually we only feel like we need to make a decision when there's fear. And so we get to question the fear and part the clouds that's blocking our clarity and our awareness. And I'll share 2 practical things that I've found really helpful. One kind of one more entry and one more advanced. So mentally, you can just, if people write a pros and cons list, you can write down what are the fears I would have about A and B choice. And then start doing, I love Byron Katie's work. She was just on the podcast. Just start inquiring and questioning those fears, and then the clouds part. And that's one way. That's mentally. Another way to do it is somatically. And this is something I call the paradox of transformation. I teach both of these in my certification, but essentially you presence and you feel the feeling that you're avoiding. So what is it that you're trying to manage and manipulate life with so it doesn't happen? What are you trying to avoid feeling by doing that? And it's like, oh, I'm afraid of failure, or I'm afraid of disappointment. And feeling that as a sensation, not a story in the body, actually starts integrating it into your nervous system. If you're doing it with presence, obviously, if you don't have big T trauma, if you're allowing it, then it starts to dissolve. And from there, it's like, oh, the next step is obvious, or I need to gather more information. But then there's no fear. And then so there's no decision. And I thought that was really powerful.
I love that.
And I know that some of the work that you do is around helping people really tap into their soul's calling, right? This is a big part of what you've supported people in doing. And so as they move through the fear, I think that's going to be really helpful. But I'm curious, what is one way or a really powerful way that you've helped guide people that are lost? Like, what is my calling? I can't even hear it. Or how do I live in alignment with it?
Well, I think the first one is what lights you up. Get clear on that.
Yeah.
Because I think particularly people who are called to be part of or acknowledging that they hold a thread for the healing of humanity, there's a greater call that they feel, but often an overwhelming, like, who am I? What can I possibly do? You know, it's too big.
Yeah.
And so understanding what lights you up, which is just another way of saying, like, what makes you come alive, or what are you passionate about? What could you do with, you know, without getting exhausted? You know, what would you do if you weren't like for free, for example? So these are all just different ways to gather that information. And then the second way is I'd look at courage. So, you know, there's fear, which protects us. We don't want to, you know, mess with that. But often our fears, like those things that we're like, oh gosh, I couldn't possibly do that. Like, who am I to do that? Actually can be gatekeepers to our greatest gifts, you know? And so like an inquiry is, if I was feeling courageous, what would I do? Or if I knew I'd be supported no matter what would I do? If I trusted myself, what would I do? And so really being curious and answering those questions courageously and intuitively as well, like whether it's through, you know, working with someone or like journaling. You could bullet point 1 to 10 or just intuitively write. We eventually will get to the same answer over and over again. And that's when you know.
Yeah.
And the other thing I just want to acknowledge as well is, because I think another reason why so many of us don't trust our intuition or act on our intuition is because we're afraid of it, or we're doubting it. And often, and this has certainly been the case for me, sometimes the only thing harder than answering the call is not answering it. And so it's really frustrating and annoying. And I think this is why it takes us a while. But, you know, it's easy to look at those people that we admire, which obviously also is an indication as to what is rising within us, those people that we respect or maybe even envy. There's information there.
Good.
And it's easy to look at them and just project onto them that, oh, it's so easy for them. They always knew. And especially like in podcasts like this, like not this, but, you know, when you're like talking about your story and then this happened and it all just worked out perfectly. Like, we're not including those like many, 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 many days and nights where you're like, what?
Questioning. So, No, I love that. And I love that you also say anyone that you're admiring or you're inspired by or envious of, that's a reflection in you of something that's already inside. And so rather than just putting it on someone else, starting to really see how are they a mirror? What are they reflecting to me about myself? And how can I express that more fully in my life so that they own it more? That's really, really important and beautiful.
So true.
And I imagine you work with a lot of people who identify as empaths or highly sensitive people, which is such a gift. You know, it's such a gift to have that. And it can be also really challenging to navigate a world that can be pretty numbed out. I'm curious if you have any guidance or advice for people that are, wanting to work with their energy a bit more.
Yeah. I've got a practical tool that I do myself where I imagine myself in this like golden egg kind of connected to source. So my hand is pointing towards heavens, cosmos above, imagining a pillar of light coming in through the crown, hitting the heart, but also dropping roots down to the center of the earth, sacred waters. And so you're resourcing from heaven and earth. And then kind of imagine your light. Because I think this is true, I think, for all of us, but particularly sensitives, our boundaries can become quite porous. And so, and it's almost like the light attracts, sometimes a bit of negativity. And so the idea is that, and we can be a bit watery, you know, versus like really strong. And so if you're sourcing from heaven and earth and then from the heart, imagining like you're creating this golden egg with your light, but it's like a force field. It's going all around you. And so you're building it out. And that's your sacred space. And only you get to decide what enters as well. And I imagine like a fine cloth, like almost like a cheesecloth covering it. And so, yeah, anything that kind of comes at you that is, I don't know, I don't want to say negative in the, you know, that black and white sense, but, you know, not something that's going to serve you. It can't pass it. And so really working on cultivating your sacred space and your energy center. And if you can't kind of build it out like that, then maybe it's time to spend some time on your own in nature, whatever it is that will fill you up. So you're really managing your energetic container before then going out and, you know, just becoming a victim to the energies of the world, you know?
Really anchoring and rooting. And I also remember earlier in the conversation you were talking about really feeling and being in your body, right? Because the more you're in your body, the less other things can be picked up.
I think the greatest tool, anyone who resonates with being an empath or highly sensitive, the best tool that we have actually is our body, because we are so sensitive and we can pick up on stuff, whether it's thoughts, whether it's emotions, whatever it is, it's kind of irrelevant. We pick up those things from our senses, which are part of our body. And if they're ours or if they're someone else's, we want to do something with it. Otherwise it stagnates and just kind of freezes us in the body and makes us feel stuck. And that's when we can particularly confuse it as being like, is this mine? Have I done something wrong? Or why do I feel like this? Oh my gosh. I wish, and it's, dance has been such a big tool for me. And it's in those moments that I forget to dance that I really need to dance. I remember just the other day, something happened and I'm a type 4 on the Enneagram. And so what are you?
I'm a type 3 with a 2 wing.
Oh, lovely. I got a 3 wing. And so I can go into shame. I know that about myself. And so
I don't know anything about shame.
I outed myself to a couple of my friends who know the Enneagram, and one of them said, first of all, shame is a tool used by the patriarchy. Don't let it freeze you. And I felt that so deeply. And she said, move your body. Move your body. Don't let your soul leave. And I did a combo of things, which the first one was dance. Every day I'd put on a particular track and I just let it go, and really trusting the intelligence of the body. So it wasn't about just like dancing like you're at a party or a wedding or whatever, but really just letting my body move how it wanted to move. I really love Sia, the artist for this, because she really does like invoke these big feelings. And I find that often, like if it's grief, there's these movements around the chest, around the lungs. And it reminded me of a lot of the processes that I've done in somatic processing. And the body knows. And the other thing I did was I would go into the mirror and just look at myself in the mirror and just call myself fully back. Because I think when we experience these big emotions or conflict or whatever it is, part of us can kind of opt out, disassociate. And so if we can just call ourselves gently over and over again back in, move our body so we occupy the space rather than leave it. Yeah. Oh my gosh, I wish I did that earlier in my life.
It's usually the things
I
we
would
want
have
to
saved
resist.
a lot of things.
It is the things that we want to resist that are actually like most helpful and important to do then and there. We got to dance sometime, because dance is, I feel most myself when I dance, and dance has been such a practice for me, about learning how to stay in my body and what's true while engaging with other people. So it's like I can be influenced, but like, also it's been really helpful around burnout. And I wanted to bring this up too, where it's like, no, Carolyn Mace said something that I really enjoyed. She's like, it's as if the universe gives you $100 a day and you can invest it or use it. And I realized I could dance using my personal reserve, my personal energy, or I could let universal energy move through me and dance me. So it's draining to do what I think I should do versus what's my body want to do in this moment, where it's more energizing. And I feel like I have full body orgasms on the dance floor if I allow this energy to move through and energize me. And it's like also knowing that we can channel that into whatever creative, projects that are alive and true in our heart, so that it doesn't have to be just us, but we can be nourished by it. So yes, it helps clear energy, but it also helps us stay connected. We're insourcing, we're attuned.
Yes. And I think there's so many practices that we can do that. I love that analogy of letting the universal source energy, whatever you call it, move through you. And because at first there may be a let's clear, but then eventually something else comes. I think the same happens with devotional chanting. There comes a point when you're chanting, and in my training, we were taught to let the chant be nectar for you. So as you're singing, like offer it to yourself. And there's always a point in the chant where the voice changes slightly, and it's almost like you're being sung rather than you're the one doing the singing. It's so beautiful.
Yeah, that's also really, I would think of a lot of empaths or highly sensitive people can oftentimes use their gifts as healers, therapists, and coaches. That's some of what my audience is. And so they tend to lean towards 2 in the Enneagram, the helper. And so what you're saying is like, let the song nourish you. So there's no sacrifice. You're filling yourself up and then giving and not even giving. It's more of a, sharing
receiving
from that wholeness. Receiving.
You're reminding me of and I want to preface this. I'm about to talk about motherhood, and I want to say I got 2 babies and I'm exhausted, so don't get me wrong. But I remember with both of my babies, but particularly my first, like you kind of have the experience the first time. But I remember in those nights where it's just like, every 20 minutes and you're just rocking them, and you're at the supermarket and you catch yourself rocking because you're just so used to it. Oh my God. But I remember being one time for the first time being aware of this like presence where it was like I was rocking him, but it was like the great mother was rocking me. And I felt that presence of her. And maybe it was my ancestors, or maybe it was the goddess, or maybe it was that universal energy. But I kept on reminding myself that when I felt like, I can't do this anymore. And I remember going to the Chalice Well, which is, I live in Glastonbury in the UK, and there's this seat, it's like a swing seat. And I would go there to like consciously be like, okay, I'm rocking my baby and I'm being rocked too. So it was like I was receiving it. And as I would sit there, I would call upon that energy. And so it just goes to show that it's like, it's always there.
Yeah.
You lay on the earth, it's there. It's like the feminine aspect of the earth is so abundant and always there to give to us. But we have been raised to not see that and receive that, and we're starving for that as well. I need to always remember that.
I know. I just did a ceremony with my dad. He's at a retreat center up in Mount Shasta. He's a shaman, and I've held space with him. We've had us other people hold space for us, but he and I have never had our own ceremony. And I went out and I put my feet in nature. He's like, put your feet in nature and just breathe the energy of the earth in. And I was so clear that life is so alive. It was just teaching me, this one tree specifically, it was just like energetically showing me that there's no separation. And if I don't receive, then I'm cutting off the whole. And so part of, and that there's, and I had to clear some of my own psychological stuff around feeling like it was a burden to have needs or to ask. And then I can see from my childhood where that got created. And, I felt bad for asking, and I could see how that's played out with my team. But so some of these things can be so basic and simple, but then play out both in how, even with burnout, I think, it's not listening to our bodies. It's abandoning parts of ourselves for some future vision or something that we think will happen. And I think sacrifice is beautiful in the sense of like parenting. The intention is beautiful, but like you're saying, there's ways that we can be nourished while we're nourishing, a project, a family, whatever it may be, so that we're not cut off from the receiving. So this is deep in my psyche that I've been integrating, and nature. And I know you are big into nature. So I've got literally my podcast studio. I wanted to feel like I was in an enchanted forest and bring people in. So
it looks gorgeous.
Yeah, and that nourishment to receive that, to breathe that in, that unlimited supply of energy tapped in through nature. So I think we're on the same 100% same wavelength with that. And I think of also when you were talking about these, you're feeling held by the goddess while also rocking your baby. I think of us being multidimensional in consciousness. And I have, thinking of like a Russian doll, it goes small to big, where it's like the truth of our being, and then our egoic self, and then our, younger self, all all being mirrored in that moment. And so thank you for that, because I think for a lot of mothers or parents, that can be really nourishing to say, how am I being held, while I'm holding? There's no separation. And the divine feminine, I know, is so central to your work. And I want to talk about it a bit, just because I think through patriarchal conditioning, we've really highlighted the masculine, and part of the time is the rise of the feminine, and we're healing some of that so that we can come in harmony and balance with what our truth is. I know some people, like really the goal is about alignment. The goal is truth. And so some people may lean more towards masculine naturally or feminine, and we'll talk about integration in a moment. But I'm curious, for people that want to really receive more of the feminine, embody that, work with the goddess, do you have any insight or wisdom to share with people that want to go deeper into this?
I would say, look back at your life and notice any moment that you've been in a state of awe. Awe is like when your breath's been taken away. I'm biased to flowers and the ocean and sunsets. Like, no matter how spiritual or non-spiritual you are, we've all experienced that. And I think those moments of awe, it really is like at the heart of being a mystic, right? Which is kind of living into the mystery of, whoa, wow. And when we're in those moments of awe, and so often it's through witnessing beauty. And now beauty isn't perfection. Beauty is actually the opposite of perfection. Life is beautiful, birth is beautiful, death is beautiful. The rose is beautiful, but so often in our mind we're thinking, oh, it's the full bloom that's beautiful. But that's only beautiful because it's only there for a short amount of time. And so allowing yourself to fully be in those moments where your breath is taken away, and they're subtle at first, but you can expand them. And I think that is having an intimate experience of the feminine as goddess, earth as goddess. Yeah.
And what about for people that have really prioritized, because I think through patriarchy, we've really not honored the gifts of the feminine. And obviously we all have feminine and masculine within us. But what about for people that are like, I know the feminine is powerful and important, and yet they're still prioritizing what things that they should be doing? Is there any type of a lot of the work that I do is a lot like, for me personally, even removing some of the conditioning, because then I think we naturally removing it by bringing inquiry. I think we both have a love for inquiry, questioning, and getting curious about how did this come about, or what is my nature as love, or, inquiry can be self-inquiry, questioning our own stories that we've been bought into, or, you can go deep in lots of different forms of inquiry. But I think, I can feel in myself sometimes where I'll lean more towards the productive or the logical, kind of like you were talking about your story earlier of like flowers, like, and so for people in that situation that just haven't, and maybe it could also be, as I'm talking, really seeing how that like living into the mystery elevates every other part of your life, and really diving deeper into that may motivate while also removing or questioning some of the conditioning we've been bought into, so that we can fully receive and prioritize the feminine in our life.
Well, I think I'd talk to the mind in the sense of like, talk to the mind, but say nature, I'm going back to nature, but okay, so if you're like, okay, I want to manifest, I want to make stuff happen, but you're kind of like, if you're that, you're probably leaning forward with your body, and it's like, bring yourself back to center, or maybe you're resisting because you're like, whoa, bring yourself back to center. But embody the rose. So what does the rose do? The rose is not running around trying to hunt down the bee. It is just saying, here I am. Look at me. It is receiving the sun. It's receiving the water. And it's drawing the bee to it, not through effort, but through transmitting who it is.
Yeah.
And I think for those of us who maybe feel a little bit like brittle, or like we have to push and control and make stuff happen, and, having a strong work ethic is incredible. Following up with grounded action is necessary.
Yes.
So it's not that part of it is bad.
Yeah.
It's just, how do we balance the other? And I think from a feminine point of view, if we have been kind of like making it in a man's world a little bit, the more we can get into our senses, the better. So, and that can be so simple. Like, it can just be like, I remember the first time I properly slowed down and allowed myself to have a passion fruit. Like, I knew I loved that fruit. But if you actually like give yourself, it can just be 10 seconds. It doesn't have to be long, but take 10 seconds to have a spoonful of passion fruit or strawberry or raspberry. Oh my God. When I did that, I was like, if man made this, it would be millions of dollars worth.
I do.
Yeah.
I just had a liver cleanse, and I don't normally eat fruit. And one day I had to eat all fruit, and I had a peach.
Whoa.
I'm like, wow.
Whoa.
Like, really waking up to the gifts that nature brought of a peach. We can go unconscious and, try to move through. But I love what you're saying. Like this doing and being, we need both the masculine and the feminine, yin and yang. And part of the work is to allow for both. A lot of the work that I do with coaches, therapists, and healers, I'll talk about creating clients, the masculine, and then attracting clients, this like magnetism. You're bringing people to you through your energy and through manifestation. And if you just do one, it's like you've got your hand behind your back, versus having your full potential, where it's like, I feel empowered to know how to create a client anytime I want, to be of service using my gifts, using both the left and right. So I love that you speak to that. And I'm curious if there's a story through diving into this work that you've realized, like maybe a lesson or something that you realize that you feel like everyone should know, just for people that haven't really done some of this work. And you're like, wow, I wish more people realized this.
I think I would probably say the greatest wisdom I had with that was during one of my births, where it was like just the whole, I think the codes of all of life can be found there. And in like the ability to kind of allow yourself to expand after you contract was like, oh my gosh, like not resisting the contraction, but then in between just going into full surrender and then the expansion happens. It's like it is coded into nature, and we are nature. Every living thing is nature, and we have this incredible gift with our mind and this incredible gift with our voice that we can create and express and make things with our hands. And so we're not just meant to be in that surrender state, but we're also not just meant to be in the doing state. And I think this is the incredible thing about being human, is that we are this bridge between the two. And yeah, heaven and earth. Some people would say masculine and feminine. I don't know if it's as clear cut as that, but I think it is in our innate blueprint.
Yeah. And as you're talking, I'm even thinking if you're leaning too hard on the masculine, there is burnout. And so then it's like sometimes I always say life is the real coach. Life is showing us what is out of balance. And so, it's not bad, but we get feedback. So then, coming back to the breath, which is that bridge, coming back to relaxing and receiving, and that magnetism. So we're receiving in the giving, and that there's no separation in that.
Totally. And I think also just recognizing that there are different phases of life that we go through, and just like the outer seasons change, we go through periods of inner seasons, I'm coming out of a very long period of, I would call it inner winter, where I was called to retreat and really be in my feminine in a completely different way than I'd ever been before. And it wasn't in full bloom or anything like that. It was literally cocooned and processing and being in that fertile void, which people think the darkness is the end, or the darkness is nothing's happening. But really beneath the surface, it's never been more feminine. It's never been more active. So I think recognizing what season you're in on an inner level as well helps. So, because there are times when we are called to go out and just go for it, and others it's like,
yeah. And I love that you talk about the light, but you include the dark. I think that's so important. And I know you talk about how that sometimes the darkness is like a birthing process, that we're essentially, as we venture into darkness, it really, and just to kind of bring the light to the shadow, without doing that, it's not fully integrated. And so I love that you honor both. It's like we go into the dark, we don't live there. And, I think holding both equally is important. And some people that talk about light completely abandon the dark, which is the whole point of integration, of bringing that. And so I'm imagining that there's somebody listening to this right now who, might be going through a hard time, or things are falling apart. And I'm curious, if there's any kind of words of wisdom or something that you could share from a higher perspective, so that they feel held, or they can hold it in perspective, what they might be going through, some of these initiatory gateways that you speak of.
Well, I think first of all, when we do find ourselves in those rock bottom dark moments where, maybe we've lost a loved one, a job, a relationship, there's been a big change in our life, kids have left home, whatever it is. But sometimes it can be more like dark nights of the soul, as in all of the spiritual connection and tools that I once used are no longer working.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that they were wrong or they are wrong. It just means that we're being called into a different phase. The shamans call it dying while still fully living. This is the only way to properly be reborn, have a rebirth, right? And we can rebirth ourselves in the middle of our lives, or 3/4 of the way through, or a quarter of the way through. We can continually do that. And I actually think we're all being called to do that, particularly right now on the planet. And I know it can feel scary to be in this in-between place. I actually think the in-between is the most scary, because we know we're not who we once were, but we don't quite know who we're becoming. But without that courage to be like the rose who releases its petals to the soil for the chance to do it again, like the fruit won't come, the rose hip, and the second bloom won't come either. And so it's like, it's at these times that our faith is definitely challenged, and we are invited to hold on to the light that we can connect with. Now, I know it can feel like all the lights have been turned off, but I do also know that when we are in the depths of the depths, it's also possible and sometimes easier to connect in with our own inner light than it is when it's all summer and full bloom and bright around us. And so I would just say, if you are there, hold on to that, have faith in that, and be led by that. Because if you are in that moment, it's because you're changing. It's because like a part of you is dying or has died. But anything new is only born in darkness. Everything, like the tomb is the womb. So, yeah.
Yeah. And so, what I'm hearing you saying is that there are gifts in hitting rock bottom. There are gifts in the darkness in those times. And, I've watched a girlfriend of mine who's a 7 in the Enneagram go through a really challenging time. And who she is on the other side of it is so much more deep and full bloom. Like I'm sorry that you went through that. I know it was hard. And I can say this for my own experiences and who I become as a result of that, touching in, because there's no way around it. It's just through. And like the more we can stay awake while we're going through it, and there's, having community, but even I think of the image of a yin and yang, there's still light in the dark, right? Or even in the light, there's like when you love so fully, there's a bitterness in it. Or when it's so dark or so hard, there's also gifts in it. So to keep also focusing on those, to see it in the full picture, I think is important. I'm curious if there's ever been a time you went through an initiatory gateway, or you really had to embrace what you were, being invited into your next level through a hard time.
Totally. I've had two significant ones. The first one, I was like, it's definitely my dark night of the soul, but I don't think it was. It was like dark night of the ego, unfortunately. But yeah, that one was really around my Saturn return. So I think it was 2010, 2011. And yeah, I mean, I had lots of life circumstantial things that happened that kind of triggered it, but it was really something that was happening within me at the same time. So I had a couple of very, very good friends pass away in succession, very unexpectedly, and long-term relationship, which had been my only adult relationship. It was 11 or 12 years, ended as well. And so it was, and I knew that my career didn't fit my soul. And so it was really, I was totally depressed and totally angry that this career, this life, everything that I'd invested actually wasn't where I was being called to go. And I knew it, but it took the external things around me to crumble, I think. And the grief that I felt, for my heart to open more, and I just had no energy to fight it anymore. So it actually made it easier to connect in with my inner light, even though like I wouldn't have wished it upon myself. And of course, now I look back, I'm like, oh, that was amazing that happened. But I definitely wouldn't have chosen it if I knew. And then just recently, and when I say recently, I mean 2017, I had a very significant, spontaneous mystical experience where it was in my Bhakti teacher training, and I had an experience where it was with the Great Mother. I call it a Great Mother Awakening, and I saw the gates of life. I saw souls entering and leaving, and I saw the ecstasy and the agony, the joy and the sorrow, like all of that, and just how huge this human experience is. It changed me on such a deep, deep cellular level. I'm only just beginning to talk about it. It's literally the opening chapter of my book that's coming out, Your Soul Had a Dream. And it changed me at such a deep level. And I think this this is important to say with the awakening experience and spiritual awakenings, even if they are spontaneous, they take a while to stabilize in our systems because they change us so deeply. And after that, I had my first baby, which, oh my God, like almost destroyed me and made me all at the same time. And then it was a couple months ago, it was 2 months later, COVID and all of that, and so much more that happened in 2020. And then my daughter, and after I had my daughter, I started to come out of it, but it was definitely a dark night of the soul. I tapped into some deep, deep, ancient feminine rage within me that wasn't just my own. Loads of deep ancestral healing and clearing and childhood processing, all the stuff that was in the body that I didn't even know was there, you know? Whoa.
Yeah.
I knew there was a reason why I was scared to become a mother. Jeez. Yeah. But then, oh, holy hell. Yeah. But I look back now and I'm like, wow. Like, the woman I've become is unrecognizable, and there's no way I would have chosen it. And would I do it again? I don't know. Maybe. I don't know. But you don't get that choice. But there's no way I'd be able to be who I am now without it.
That's right. That's right. And I think it's hard to see that when we're in the frame, when we're in the moment. And so, and not to bypass, because I really appreciate people that, and, you know, having been a somatic psychotherapist, like really doing the work, we live lighter and freer, you know, and I would just share with people, it's like, if it's almost like you have a drawer, junk drawer, and if you stuff everything in, it just postpones it. And like life says one thing and it triggers that drawer and it opens and it's just like overflowing and overwhelming, versus if you just like, or maybe a tea kettle would be a better example. It's like if you just open the lid a little bit to relieve the pressure, you know, as it's boiling, it won't overflow, and life is easier as a result. I remember years ago when I was getting my master's in spiritual psychology, I had a dream. It was a channeled dream. And I heard that I'm here to help people see that the darkness isn't bad. And, you know, there's psychological darkness. And yes, actually, as a result of going through, you live lighter and freer. And somebody like triggers that same wound and the drawer opens, but it's just the current moment trigger, not all the past stuff that's been pushed down that also triggers. So it gets lighter and freer. But there's also a spiritual darkness. In Zen, they talk about the void. And that's the most potent. It's the ground of being, and it's the most potent. I think some people, when they ask, like, who am I? They're looking for an answer, a something, versus just hanging in the void and experiencing that as the answer. And so I just want to share for people that are, because I like the psychological and the spiritual. And if people are going into some of the the shadow work that you're doing psychologically, if you've had some level of awakening, I would highly encourage you to make sure that that is the foundation for where you're doing the work from, because it accelerates things. Everything's looking to be met with love. And so your nature is love. And so as you embody what you are, welcoming some of the hard experiences or uncomfortable sensations, it starts to integrate into your nervous system. You feel lighter and freer. You know, it's the difference between essence embracing ego. You say soul, I'll say essence, but essence embracing ego, soul embracing ego not bad, or ego on ego. And that's fine. There's still work to do, you know, on that level for people that aren't available. But if you are either a facilitator yourself, or you've had some level of awakening, where you come from in this work, I think accelerates things. It's more profound. And so I just want to share that with people. But I also know I want to hear a bit about your book that's coming out. I would love to hear some of the excitement or some of the wisdom you want to share with us around it.
Well, I think I'd just say, so the subline is how to be held by life when it feels like everything's falling apart. And so it really is, it's for all of us who are changing. And I don't know anyone who has not been through huge changes over the past at least 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years. Oh my goodness. It is really about embracing the darkness as something not to be afraid of. So the fertile void of the womb, and to gather the courage to be honest when we are in these alchemizing, transitionary, in between phases of our life, which is very feminine as well, and to embrace them, not as a way of like it taking us down, but embrace them so that we can find our way through it, because we will be made through it. And I talk about dark nights of the soul and many other kind of topics in it, like friendships ending. Like in our society, we don't talk about endings like that. But actually, I was reflecting when you were talking about the void before, and then kind of connecting with your question before about what's a feminine practice or a feminine practice. And one of the greatest feminine practices that I've ever done is allowing things to properly end and leaving space without filling it in, which, oh my gosh, that's been such a challenge for me. But with that, one of the best things I ever did was I had my biggest program. It was called Work Your Light, and it was very popular, but it was all of a sudden just not feeling congruent to me with where I was. Nothing wrong with it, but I'd changed, the world had changed. I just wasn't being called to hold it, but it was like, oh my gosh, like how will my business survive without it, And I kept on, you get the guidance and you keep waking up. And so I decided I'm just going to do it. I'm going to just close enrollment and just wait. And so nervous.
Good for you.
And
That's great.
And for such a long time, I'd had this vision for my mystery school, a mystery school. But I couldn't land the pillars. I couldn't land what the modules were, what the exact journey was. I could have recorded it. It could have been created, but I didn't want to create something that wasn't going to be like, the big pillars. And honestly, it was literally within 3 weeks of closing it, I was on holiday in Australia and boom, 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 they just landed, and we knew what the journey was, and it was just so clear. And I'm certain that had I kept the previous open and was holding that space still, it wouldn't have, and then it opens up a whole new beginning, a whole new trajectory. So I think that's a wonderful feminine practice that can be really challenging, of like leaving space, letting things end properly. Because I think it causes us so much pain, particularly those friendships ending or things not ending properly. And us not having set ways to mourn it,
Yeah. Or not taking the space to mourn it and get distracted and move on or fill that space, which is,
and then just repeat it.
Yeah. And then life presents another opportunity. It's like we've had infinite opportunities to learn whatever lessons we're meant to learn. Thank you so much. That's why I'm proactive with it. I'm like, okay, whatever life is showing me, I want to use that for my growth, for my healing, for my evolution. I think right now I'm currently being, I'm learning about allow it to happen and make it happen, which is some of this dance of feminine and masculine. I'm being apprenticed around that because I can go into make it happen. I can go into surrender. But I think part of my journey was doing a lot of silent retreats, a lot of stillness for, I've done 20 silent retreats, and then the pendulum moving into career and really feeling like I want to know myself as all of it, to sink my teeth into life and know that there's no separation, awaken doing. And so the integration of that pendulum is happening now. But yeah, I don't feel like a lot of people talk about and normalize as you evolve, so will your friendship, so will your business, so will your life. And I know that there's so much juicy content in the book coming up. So tell us where we can find the book. Tell us how we stay connected with you and what you're up to.
Yeah, just over at my website. It's go to rebeccacampbell.me/Your Soul Had a Dream. And you'll find it on Amazon, all the places. It's called Your Soul Had a Dream, Your Life Is It. Yeah. Thank you.
So good. So good. I love your essence in the world. I remember back in the day, I listened to one of your meditations. It was about receiving, breathe and receive. I can hear your voice. So it was so good. Thank you for your guidance. You've got an amazing podcast as well. Tell us about your podcast.
Yeah, it's called Returning with Rebecca Campbell, and it's all about returning to the wisdom within.
And your voice is so healing and so nourishing. So all of your meditations are really beautiful as well.
Oh,
thank you for being here, Rebecca. Thank you so much for doing this work that changes the world, starting with yourself. It truly does make a difference. And if you're finding value in this podcast, a cost-free way to support us is by leaving an up to 5-star review. It does mean the world to us. And as a thank you gift, we're going to send you one of the most powerful tools that you will ever discover. You're going to get behind the scenes access showing you how to live into your full potential without letting fear hold you back from stepping into your dreams. Just head over to Apple Podcast or Spotify and leave a review now. You can take a screenshot before hitting submit and then go to alyssanobriga.com/podcast to upload it. And make sure to have your automatic downloads turned on wherever you listen so you don't miss any of the upcoming episodes. I have so much magic I can't wait to share with you. And you can find all this information in the show notes below. But lastly, if you're on Instagram, I love connecting and hearing from you. So come on over and say hello. I'm at Alyssa Nobriga. Thank you again for being here. I cannot wait to share more with you.